Well, I'm sitting here in Prague with the National Museum, a bastion of history, behind me. And to the other side of me is the new building, which I'm getting ready to walk into here in a minute. But I suspect that what I saw in the other museum, in the old version, will hold true in the new one, and that is that it was the paleontologic history, I hope that's correct, of humans and the zoological history of animals as well. Took up the better part of 3 floors. It's a beautiful building, and it goes from primitive all the way through the Iron Age, the display of items in the human history. And what I noticed was there was no notation of Roma anywhere. And they definitely would have been in the Czech area and still are today during that period of history, especially during the Iron period. I also noticed a lot of ironwork within the building itself, just beautiful iron staircases, which I have pictures of that will be up on the P3 Strategies Inc. Flickr site. And more than likely, that ironwork was handcrafted by Roma, or there were Roma involved in the process, yet Roma were completely neglected from the nations of Czech Republic National History Museum. And we wonder why they feel as if they are unknown, unrecorded, uncared for. And what this impresses upon me is the same history that the United States has gone through in Black history, where there has been little acknowledgement of historical figures in Black history until recent times, and even then it's still small in comparison to what it ought to be. And that brings me to my next point. So we've talked about communism and its power over the Roma, and we've talked about welfare, and then we've talked about the powder keg of paying for social services and what that means to the government and also to the white Slovaks. But what we haven't talked about is education. And what came to light during our interviews in Slovakia was that education is not valued by the Roma population. In fact, one of our interviewees, a young and talented painter, said that who's a Roma, said that because he was using his mind to work in painting and being a teacher's assistant at a school that has an art department, he lives inside the Roma village, but he's not considered Roma. They think he's become white because he uses his brain and not his back to work. So there's a perception that both education and using your mind to make money is not a positive and makes you less of a Roma if you do so. That's a challenge, again, in looking towards trying to figure out if there are social enterprise options to be able to help the Roma use business to bring themselves out of poverty. If their idea is that backs and not minds have to be used, then that means they'll never be in a position, an executive position or a management position. It will always be more of a blue-collar workforce. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, but social enterprise usually requires an entrepreneur, and that means using your brain as well as your back to get the job done. So yet another challenge, perceptions of education. And another note, due to the social welfare system, parents are rewarded with money for their children going to school. So when their children are in school, they're paid a stipend based on those children getting good grades, but at the same time, this is yet another way in which the welfare system might possibly be hindering the development of the Roma into a self-sustaining group of people, because that money may or may not be the full motivator for sending kids to school. Often children will go through primary and usually what would be considered middle school, and sometimes go on to get some kind of certification in woodworking or as a seamstress or some other certification that happens during the time most of us would go to high school. However, they don't usually go on to take jobs in Slovakia. Some will say that's because they can't be hired, or that they've worked for a while and they were laid off due to the economy and then they can't be hired back because they're only hiring white folks. Some will say it's other reasons, and of course many white Slovakians will say it's because they're lazy. What the real answer is probably not consistent among all of the Roma, but we certainly know without a doubt that education is not as highly valued as we'd like it to be, for there to be more education and more devotion to education. We also know that working with your brain instead of your back can sometimes disassociate you from your own Roma group. So to succeed and be a social entrepreneur, a business owner, in some cases may mean that you're in a third culture. You're no longer part of the Roma, but you're certainly not accepted by white Slovaks as an equal either. That's a big challenge and a big difference from working in other cultures where there is no social welfare to promote them and keep them in a situation where they can continue to buy food and the most basic of necessities. And therefore there is a motivation, a drive, a need, a human need for survival that propels people in those situations to work. In the Roma situation, maybe it is the welfare that's causing it, maybe it's the discrimination, maybe it's the lack of interest in education as a tool to reach out of poverty, maybe it's the two generations that we're in now that have not seen work, and the children below them that are not seeing parents or grandparents working. Maybe it's the young age that marriage and children occur in the Roma society. There are so many different factors that have to be explored when understanding the environment and deciding what kinds of social entrepreneurism or social enterprise opportunities might best fit and motivate the Roma to help themselves work out of poverty and use sustainable development to do it.